Hello and welcome to our Science Education Series Symposia at virtual Regeneron ISEF. I'm Caitlin Sullivan, our Director of Outreach and Equity Programs at Society for Science in the Public, and I'd like to welcome you to join us in our discussion today to support underrepresented students and underserved students in STEM research projects and STEM competitions. Today I'm joined by two educators who are part of our advocate program. The advocate program supports teachers who are working with underserved students in entering STEM competitions. So I'm going to begin by inviting both of them to introduce themselves. Carrie, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Carrie Metter. I am a high school science teacher in Louisville, Kentucky.
All right, thank you. And Priscilla?
Hi, I'm Priscilla Lumbreras, and I am a high school science teacher at Granbury High School in Granbury, Texas.
All right, thank you both for joining us today. We really appreciate your willingness to share your advice and experiences with teachers across around the world. All right, our first question for you today is what motivated you to start guiding students, especially underrepresented students, through research and competition? Carrie, let's start with you.
Sure. So my demographic at my school is over 80% African American, an additional 10% minority. So that is my population. So it was really important for me to get into science research because for a number of years I had some administration who is not necessarily as supportive as I would have liked. And so getting some new administration allowed me to ask new questions about pursuing that. And so once I got a green light, it became just an opportunity outside of the classroom and also something I could embed within the classroom that allowed my students just a different experience in something that I knew had significant value.
Thank you. And how did you gain your administration support, or how do you continue to communicate to them about the importance of your program?
So I think one of the main sellers, if you will, for the administration is one, just in reference to student learning. You know, principals are all about student growth and student learning and experiences that engage them in that learning process. So selling it that way, you can never go wrong. The other piece is there's always a need for outside of classroom experiences that kind of connect our students with the community, allow them to engage in things with their parents. And so that kind of extended conversation is also, again, it's just a win-win. So it's really hard to not garner support for that. And I think once the administration sees value in those things turning around, it just further fuels the fire.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and these things take time, so we encourage all the teachers out there who are listening and want to do the same thing that Carrie and Priscilla are doing to be persistent, and it'll happen. Okay, Priscilla, how about you? What motivated you to start supporting students, especially underrepresented students, in some research projects and competitions?
So my previous school where I started, my journey with STEM research, it was 98% Latino. And so exactly like Carrie said, that was the population that I was working with. And I was kind of like in a little bubble where I was not aware of everything else. Now, once we started making it to the state competition, and we realized that there was not a lot of Hispanic kids that were participating in these competitions, that's when I started to realize this is important. This is something that I need to push at my district level, everywhere that I can go, and just be an advocate for underrepresented students. And then also in terms of the student, it gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them something that they can be proud of. And also it gives them that idea of, hey, I'm actually good at science. And that's really my main motivation is them realizing that they have something to give to science.
Thank you. And we've kind of seen that theme through some of our other symposia, the sense of belonging that participating in these programs. It's not always easy to find your place in high school or middle school, And so that's one really powerful impact of these programs. Okay, next question for both of you. What are some of the tools and techniques you've used to recruit students to your programs and to motivate students to continue to stay with them? Carrie, how about you?
So I know there's just kind of some differing opinions about how to go about this. And I found that what works for me, because I started out doing things on a volunteer basis, and when you're working with a student body that is not used to this experience, oftentimes they just don't know what they're getting into, and so often won't take the bite. So I started making it mandatory for all of my advanced placement biology students. And so once that happened, even though there was some grumbling, once that happened and they went through the process, they were able to kind of serve as these beacons for other students to at least have some experience and awareness of what science research looks like, what science competitions entailed. And so since that's happened, we've had significant growth in that program with being able to recruit other teachers and other students, even in small numbers, but still broadening the spectrum, and that's been a big deal. Another major thing that's been a huge help for us are bringing in community mentors. So our school utilizes a local GE, so we utilize engineers from a local company, and we also utilize graduate students from a local university who are knee deep in their own research. And those are resources that I bring into my classroom to further help mentor the students in the design process.
Okay, thanks. Priscilla, how about you? What tools or techniques have you found worked for you for recruiting and maintaining, helping the students to stay motivated in the program?
So the program at Granbury High School right now, it's completely volunteer. And I'm always recruiting. I recruit from parents, at the gym, everywhere where I'm at. I'm like, hey, do you have a kid that's in high school? Do they want to do this? We have scholarships. So the main thing for us is if a kid qualifies to state, we were able to get some of our local businesses to donate to the fund, and students earn a scholarship. And it basically, they keep it it starts when they're freshmen. And so I have two students that so far already have about $2,000 waiting for them once they graduate. So that's a big draw for them. Another thing is we do give a final exam exemption. So you automatically get to go to any of your classes and say, hey, I don't have to take this exam because I did science fair for this year. And they love that one. Also, we do a STEM summer camp, and I strongly believe, coming from a middle school perspective.
Oh, it looks like we lost Priscilla there for a moment. She will log back in again. Carrie, let me ask a follow-up question. You had mentioned a partnership that you have with engineers. How did you get started with that partnership?
So through a couple of friends that I had in the district, I heard of a middle school that was a pilot program for these engineers coming in for some of their students. And so I just reached out and said, hey, I heard you're doing this. Are you doing this at the high school level as well? And the response was, no, not yet. And so I took that to mean, oh, yay, that means me now. So we just kind of started that partnership. And so I had maybe about 3 or 4 people come in maybe for 2 or 3 visits through the year, the first year. And now I have engineers and the university people come in for about 6 to 7 visits. And on average, I have about 10 to 12 people who come in. So I think it's been a great reciprocal relationship because those individuals are looking to do community outreach as well. And so when the program works well, then it allows more people in their program to be magnetized and then want to help. So we're kind of both helping each other out, and it's been a really fun success story to see over the years.
That's great. I know we have a number of advocates who have those partnerships that have developed in different ways. I'd encourage if there are any teachers who have universities nearby, a lot of scientists are looking to do outreach work as part part of their broader impact work for their National Science Foundation grants. And so if you go to sometimes there's an Office of Broader Impact, or sometimes there's a Vice President of Research. And those offices are looking for similar opportunities to what Carrie pointed out, these kinds of partnerships where they can come in and support your program. It looks like we have Priscilla back again. Sorry about that, Priscilla. Are you able to hear us? Let's see.
Yes.
Okay, good. So you were talking about, I just asked Carrie a little bit of follow-up about that partnership she has with the engineers. You were talking about some of your students actually get scholarships once they're finished with your program, some of those recruitment tools that also some of them, they don't have to take the final exam, which is great. Those are some really impressive recruitment tools that you have. Do you want to continue on with what your thought was there?
But a lot of times
I think we're having some difficulty hearing you still, Priscilla. Why don't you
funding for the
you still have some
Can you hear me?
Oh, okay, now we can hear you. Yes. Try one more time. Oh, sorry, it looks like it's not working.
So the way that we recruited
we have moments
funding.
of connectivity. Priscilla, why don't you give us a call on the phone number that we shared with you in the beginning, and I bet we're able to hear you better that way. Let's move on, Carrie, with our next question, which was what changes have you seen in your students as a result of their participation in STEM research competitions and completing these projects?
Sure. So I've kind of been in this game now for, I guess, about 4 to 5 years. And so I can look at that question from two different perspectives, one of which is the school year with individual students. And I think the biggest thing when you're looking at education, at least for my experience and a lot of teachers that I talk with, it's about confidence. It's about these students having confidence in seeing themselves in a field that oftentimes does not look like them, or that they don't have a lot of awareness that there are people who look like them, and not knowing what to do with that because they just haven't had a lot of experience sometimes. So the boost in confidence through the year, because those students are the best ones to know their work. They know their work better than I know their work. And so once they really take on ownership of that title of expert, there's a huge boost of confidence that comes. And that's, as a teacher, there are obviously academic highlights that make our day, but when it's something about their character, that's really what drives it home. And so I think that's a big piece. The other thing, if we were to switch gears and look academically through the course of the year, even over multiple years, and this is kind of also something with me too, is really an advancement of the scientific design process and knowing those steps, knowing how to time manage, knowing where the value lies in some of those for competition purposes, knowing the power of practicing, knowing the power of networking and reaching out. So those are things that our students have gained academically, being able to synthesize research from other articles, being able to do some really stepped up data analysis, and being able to share that in front of strangers. So that's a really solid growth measurement of their academic knowledge and skill levels through the year. Yeah.
That's great. I'm so glad that they have benefited in that way from participating, and I think that confidence goes a long way. You mentioned sometimes your students find themselves in situations where they're not comfortable, perhaps because they don't see other students that look like themselves. How do you talk to them in those situations to help them to remember that confidence that they've gained through the process?
Yeah, I think, anyone who's ever been to a science competition, has a reference of what just visually that looks like within the student population that's there. And so I think our students come to the table with that as well, even if it's an assumption based on no experience. It's just, when you Google scientists, there's a certain look that you get in Google responses. So I think it's a situation really of for us specifically. So I'm at Central High School, which is Muhammad Ali's alma mater, and so we are a historically Black high school. We're the first one in the state. So for us, that's a huge piece of the instructional framework within our building, is being these leaders of positive social change. So that's a message that really rings true for them, about making sure that they're making their mark, that even if they don't see people that look like them, they are being able to serve as kind of an unproclaimed mentor for people who will follow. And that's something that I think is a lot to ask of them, because that's big, but it's also the reality. And I think once they start to take that on, they feel a sense of place when they get to those environments, and they feel that they're representing something beyond themselves.
I'm really glad that they have that community behind them, because I know it can be really intimidating, but they are quite courageous in a way that really is going to serve them later in life.
For sure.
All right, next question for you. What are some of the biggest hurdles that your students face in trying to complete these research projects and compete in the competition?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I knew going in very early on was the level of resources that are available to our students. And every teacher at every school has their own level of personal classroom funding or community support and so on and so forth. But there really is a significant value in having some experience with outside partnerships. And that was something that, for example, we have a couple high schools that already have university partnerships where students leave during the day to go do their research. And our students don't have that opportunity. So the societal and academic framework that's set up within certain districts automatically poses challenges knowing going into it. So those resources that exist, it makes it creative though. And it's like, okay, if we know that really what this is about is students doing science research, then we figure out what does that look like? And so we start to, as teachers, bring in those resources that help facilitate the process. If it's about equipment, we start to reach out and become creative with how do we DIY a microscope? Are there ways that we can do this instead of having one for you to take home? And so those are some things that we start to kind of do. So the resources is probably the biggest challenge. And then obviously I think the buy-in, because when you have students who have issues with confidence, it's very common for students to respond in such a way, well, why do I need to do this? Like that, we don't do things like this. This isn't for kids like me. Those are for all those science kids. And so I think it's about breaking down those misconceptions about what science looks like and who it is that does science. And so those are kind of the two main hurdles. I think, just as an independent teacher with your own kids, once you go bigger within your school and you're wanting to reach out, it's getting buy-in from teachers that becomes an additional hurdle. Because once you get that passion, it's just like going on a trip. You can come home and show people your pictures and tell them your stories, but only you know that personal experience. It's about you selling it so that people then want to travel then with you. And so it's really about being positive about the experience, but realistic, and then serving as a resource for teachers who do want to kind of jump out on the crazy limb with you.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and teachers are obviously very a dedicated group who are there to really support these students, which we appreciate. I think we might have Priscilla on the line again. Priscilla, are you able to hear us at this point?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, all right. Let's get back just to the point that you were making when you were on with us before. You were talking about the scholarships that some of your students earn, how you keep them, what incentives they have to be part of the program, and how you keep them engaged over time when they have some competing priorities. So can you share, you were just saying that some of them don't have to take final exams, which is an amazing opportunity that is great your administration is so supportive of that.
Right. So then I was saying that the way that we get the money is the students go and present to our local Chamber of Commerce. And then once our business owners started realizing that this is amazing work that the kids are doing, they're the ones that started offering up the money, and they love being able to, help these students further their education in science.
That's great. Thank you. And then Priscilla, we were just chatting about what are some of the biggest hurdles that your students, and Carrie shared a little bit, what are some of the biggest hurdles that your students face in trying to complete these research projects and competitions? Carrie shared that one big challenge is resources, and then also buy-in from students that this is something that could be for them, that they can be scientists too. What are some of your biggest hurdles?
So for me, first of all, is when the students realize that they're at a huge disadvantage, how, just keeping them going in spite of it, and just keeping them with the confidence that they can actually make some change with their research. Also, we've run a lot into judges that have the notion that the only worthy project of winning is that project that was done in a professional laboratory. And that's a huge issue because, these judges come up to them and they don't even bother to look at their project or to listen to them. And that's very discouraging for the students. And then the last thing would be just the opportunities to build the skills that they need in order to be successful in their STEM research. And so it takes a lot, just the time to be able to build, basically.
Yeah, I think that really is a difficult perception, and I will say that at Regeneron ISEF, only 30. It was surprising to me. Only 30 to 40% of the students have professional scientists who are mentors for their projects, and I think that is a perception that a lot of folks have. Unfortunately, that you have to be in a fancy lab in order to do good science. But our head judge, a longtime head judge for our science talent search, Andy Yeager, always used to say, good science is good science. And that's what we truly believe, and that's why we really want to support the work that both of you are doing with these students. When students don't see others like themselves, who do both of you put forward as role models? Who do you tell them to look to? Who can they look and follow in the footsteps of? Carrie, what are your suggestions to them for how they can look forward as someone who's ahead of them?
Yeah, so a couple things that I've done in the past. One has been looking at kind of, national or international scientists that fit the varying degrees of diversity within my students. So whether it's females, whether it's, African Americans, Hispanics, whether it's individuals with disabilities, just any kind of spectrum, I try to locate articles about those individuals or science from them. I also tap into some of our alumni. So looking at some individuals who are currently in STEM fields and having them maybe come in for a little speech, or I'll have them write students a letter of encouragement and have a little photo of themselves that's included on the letter so that they can just visually see who this person is. And I actually, sometimes I ask them, I ask my students, does it matter that you are mentored by someone who looks like you? And oftentimes, the response is usually not really. Like, I just want to be mentored by someone who makes me feel like I'm doing okay. So it goes back to that confidence of I want someone who sees value in my work and who sees value in just me as a teenager, for that matter. Just a teenager who's doing science. There's so many great things that these teenagers are doing, especially, for me at the high school level. I think, another thing is looking at asking students to find their own mentor and, reaching out and finding someone in the community that you can connect to. And oftentimes that is very difficult because they maybe are just shy or they don't know how to reach out to people. But sometimes, even if it's with the community mentors that we bring in and they end up having an email conversation or relationship with these people, that at least gives them a buddy in the science world, if you will, and that adds a lot of value to their process about feeling part of the field.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've read some research that says a student being able just to name a scientist that they know, that they've personally met, can be really powerful as well. Priscilla, how about you? I know that you've done a lot of work with middle school students as well. Who do you tell them to look to see folks who are walking ahead of them on their scientific journey?
So what I do is I specifically look at my local universities that are close to me for faculty that are underrepresented in STEM. And so I've been able to find engineers, a lot of professors that are in the biology department, and especially female Latinas that, that is their passion already. And so they're able to talk to my students, and that kind of, gives them a little bit more confidence to know that, they have somebody like them that made it. And it gives them that impulse like, hey, I can do this too. Another tool is Skype a Scientist, and I've been able to connect my students to all kinds of scientists all over the world. And it's exactly what Carrie said. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that looks like them. It needs to be somebody that's going to give them a voice, that's going to empower them, and is going to give them confidence in terms of their ability to be successful in science. And that's really all that matters.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. Skype a Scientist is a great program. We have a new pilot program with the Society where we're trying to connect alumni. We have tens of thousands of alumni around the world from our competitions that we're working to connect to teachers. I also know that there's a program out there, I can't remember the name of it, that allows students to connect with a scientist in Antarctica. And so not only are you maybe introducing these students to a person that they, have never met before and didn't know would care about them enough to talk to them, sometimes you're also introducing them to places that they never imagined that they would go or that science would take them. So those are really great opportunities. I'm going to turn now to a few questions from the audience. The first question that we have is, how do you best help parents who are not scientists with their students? Are there special meetings or tools that you use to support, to help parents to remain engaged and interested? And this is definitely a theme that has come up again and again in our advocate program. This is a group of people that often I think are forgotten, and they're with these students, every hour that they're not at school. So, Carrie, what are your thoughts on how to help parents who are not scientists?
So a couple of things kind of first come to my mind. I think obviously for a lot of teachers right now, we've been in this online virtual instruction world where we've got parents working at home alongside their kids trying to work with schoolwork in the absence of the teacher, being physically present. And so oftentimes the reality is parents, even if they did have the resources, it's about more so the time to juggle those resources and being able to help their kids. So I do know from, if I'm being completely realistic, there are a couple of times where I've even had parents who have told me that they don't see the value in this experience for their students. So there are parents who also have, unfortunately, this misconception about the value in science research and competitions. And again, that's deep rooted, and it's unfortunate. But as teachers, we know that one of the great places for starting change is with our students, and that can kind of filter into the home. So I put a lot of emphasis on just communication via email, letters. We invite all of our parents to our school science fair so that they can see the work that their kids have done. I know there's a lot of movies and stories that we've probably read where we've got resistance parents about something their kid is doing, but then they see their kid do it and they're like, oh my God, you're amazing. And I think that sometimes happens, but it's really about little things like, encouraging the parents to allow their child to stay after school and arrange transportation if they're not going to be riding the bus so that they can stay after for 30 minutes or an hour to work on their work. It's about encouraging them to drive to the university if they make a partnership with someone and being able to arrange things like that. If we arrange equipment for the students to use, it's about having a safe place in the home dedicated to that student's work. So it's really more so about encouraging our parents to allow our students to become their own agents of the process and advocating for that ownership from the student more so than it is about schooling our parents about how to do science research. So.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. Priscilla, what are your thoughts on how to support parents as you support their students from the school end?
So a lot of my kids do not have those parents that work in science. I would say pretty much all of them. And it's important to that the parent understands this is your child's project. This is not yours. But it's important for the parents to actually be, kind of engaged with the process so that they can be that additional support for you. And what I usually do is when we first start our science fair season, I do what is called Science Saturdays, where I open up the lab on Saturdays, and I always start the very first one by inviting the parents. And I tell the parents, come and sit with me for about 30 minutes. I'm just going to explain to you what the process is, what you can do to help. And a lot of the parents come in thinking, well, I don't know anything about this. What can I do? And I explain to them that the process of STEM research has so many different parts to it. And one of the most important parts is being able to present. So I always tell my parents, every chance you get, if you're in the car, if you pick up your kid from school, whenever it is that you're together, question them, ask them questions. And if they can explain their research to you and help you understand it, then you're helping them build that skill of being able to present in front of any person that they're going to have to present. And then another thing also is, sharing. I create a Google Classroom for my STEM research group, and I always invite my parents so that they know what kind of due dates they have and what parts of their project they need to be turning in. And then the parents can see, okay, my child has already turned in my hypothesis and so forth. And so those are just some little bits and pieces that you can add to your program to help your parents feel like they're a part of the process as well.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about parents asking their students questions. And one thing that is sort of a passion of mine that I've presented at some of our advocate training institutes and also at our research teachers conferences is this idea of helping students and their parents and the administration and anyone else to realize that science is about asking questions. And so if you show that you have questions about the world, then your student is going to be, recognize that they have questions about the world as well. So I love that you don't have to know the science, but anyone can communicate and ask those questions, which is great. And I also wanted to point out one thing that Carrie mentioned that I think is a great idea. We have a lot of connectivity in some of our communities where our advocates are working, and parents may not be able to receive emails or go to Google Classroom. We hope that they all do, and we're working really hard to expand that connectivity. But one thing that Carrie mentioned was paper letters. Sometimes that is the best way to reach people. I in the past have also taught undocumented students, and some of their parents are unwilling to answer the telephone. And so I think those paper letters are a great idea because it's an easy way to communicate with parents who maybe don't have that connectivity. All right, we have another question from the audience. What suggestions could you offer to ninth grade students to maintain their interest in science fair when there are so many other external activities going on? Carrie, do you have any thoughts on that? How do you keep that interest?
So I guess I'm assuming the question is coming from the idea that you've got middle school students who have been engaged in science fair and they're coming to high school and they realize there's clubs that they can choose from. That's kind of how I'm interpreting that question. So I hope that's how it was meant. I think really, again, aside from trying to embed things into the class to just provide an experience or to allow other students and their own work to just serve as its own showcase for those students. I don't know about other strategies of persuading students, to come to one side of the fence versus the other, or placing more or less value on activities. I think all of those personally are student personal choice in where the chips fall. But I think, again, if we as teachers can use our profession and use our own students, which sounds really bad, not use our students, but you know what I mean, utilize the work of our students to serve as a beacon for those others, I think that really has a lot of power.
And Priscilla, what are your thoughts? I know you've worked at many levels. How do you if you have ninth grade students, how do they maintain that interest in science fair?
So you have to keep yourself present. You have to always, stay in their lives because, it is exactly what the question says. There's football, there's cheerleading, there's student council, there's all kinds of stuff in high school that are just trying to get their attention. And so the way that I achieve that is first I have a group remind, and I'm always sending messages to the kids all the time. And sometimes, I'll see an idea that I see online, I send it to them, and it just starts the conversation with them. So I make sure that I stay present in their lives. And sometimes I'll have a busy week, and on Fridays, it's in my agenda, reach out to the kids. And I see where they're at in terms of their research because our program is completely, after school. We do not have a research class. And so that's my reminder to reach out to my kids and say, hey, where are you at? How's it going? What are you doing? What have you found out? And you have to be very intentional to win that spot in their heart. And another thing that I do is I kind of, say, hey, I'm bringing breakfast this Friday. Come and see me. And you can gain any kid's love with food. Believe me, they're always hungry. And so every other Friday when I get paid, I'll buy some donuts, I'll make some breakfast tacos, whatever it is, just any little thing for them to come into my classroom, and I'm able to touch base with them every week.
That's great. It sounds like you do so much, Priscilla, to maintain that connection. And I'll say for teachers who are just starting off, don't think that you need to do all of this at first. Start small, start with small incentives. Priscilla is one of our former lead advocates, and she has built up her program over many years. So don't feel intimidated by the really great things that she's built up over time that have worked really well for her. I think that this might be my favorite question of the whole week. This is a junior high student. They say, I'm a junior high school student and I run my school's environmental club. I'm really interested in recruiting more underrepresented students and diverse students into our club. What would you recommend for increasing participation? Carrie, what are your thoughts? What could the student do to recruit some of their peers?
I know, I read that question. I love it so much. I love that it comes from a student. That's fantastic. So thank you for asking it. I think there's a lot of power in personal connection. I think if you, oftentimes we see posters hung up or we see social media blurbs go out. Uh, for a demographic that is not necessarily known for their awareness and experience with science research and competition or science in general, I think there's a big push for making that face-to-face personal connection. Reach out and make these individuals feel valued. Make it feel like your program will only be better if they're there. That's a really big piece. And so you can enlist the help of some of your teachers as well. Just kind of with what underrepresented students really means to kind of see who you're targeting within the scope of what you're allowed to know as a student. But then also, making sure, this is something we started recently at our science fair, our regional fair, is we started special awards for minorities where there are just prizes that are given out that kind of validate the work that's being done at a very early level by some students. But again, it's valuing the science process, it's valuing the commitment, and it's valuing the confidence that they have in that work in that field. So I think the strong thing would be personal connection.
Thanks, Carrie. How about you, Priscilla? What advice do you have for this student?
I completely agree with what Carrie said. She's spot on it. It's be intentional. So be very intentional about looking for, maybe find out what kind of club your underrepresented students are usually in. I know for my school, it's the soccer team. And so I'm good friends with the soccer coach. And so I go and I try to recruit that way. And then once you get a few of underrepresented students in there, then start talking to them and say, hey, do you have other friends that maybe we could talk to and we can get them to join into the club as well. And then little by little, you'll see it growing and you'll see it. But it's exactly what Carrie said. You need to show them what they can contribute to your club, and they need to feel like they're important and that they have a place in science.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's great advice. The other group that sometimes doesn't get mentioned, and I wanted to mention, is the school counselor. So sometimes school counselors know that students are looking, they might have a student who's looking for a place where they can belong, and they might be a person who could recommend to students, hey, I've heard that the environmental club is looking for new members. Why don't you look into it? The student who's in charge, you could offer to the counselor that they could refer students directly to you. And that might also be a way to identify students who have an interest in science or just looking for a place where they can belong, which is great. Okay, thank you. The other thing I'll mention is in our advocate program, we have a number of teachers who are not working at schools like Carrie and Priscilla are, where the majority of the students are underrepresented, but they're working at schools where the number of underrepresented students is fairly low. And one of the roles of theirs as an advocate is to go down to the counseling office and to tell the counselors that they're looking forward to having a more diverse group of students in their research class or their research program. And sometimes that communication between the counselors can have a big impact on the enrollment in a research class, just letting them know that you're not just hoping for the same students perhaps that they have always recommended into your class, but that you're hoping for a diverse set of students, and I think that can really help a lot. All right, it looks like we are about at time. Thank you so much to Carrie and Priscilla for joining us today. We really appreciate your support. I think there are so many teachers out there who are hoping to encourage more underserved students or underrepresented students in their school. to participate in their programs, and we really appreciate the advice that you have given today and continue to give as part of our advocate program. If anyone is interested in the advocate program, you can visit our website. You can also email us at either teachers at the Society for Science and the Public or advocates at Society for Science and the Public. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. And I do want to put in one last plug. We have a series of webinars that are on our website that lead advocates have created. So if you're looking to right now learn from more of our lead advocates on how you can support underrepresented students, that's a great resource. So thank you one more time to Carrie and Priscilla, and we hope everyone has a great week at virtual Regeneron.